Hello there, it's Carrie Rhodes here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's paper crafting video, I'm going to be playing with several of the club kits from Spellbinders. They offer kits that you can get delivered to you every month, like die sets, stamp sets, embossing folders, and even some new kits they have for better press and wax seals. So let's jump into card number one. I am starting out with the large die of the month, the Boo-Licious Fall Cupcake die set. Look at all of the dies in this set. I have die cut out everything here so you can see what it looks like. There are different options with these dies, and I'll show you those because I'm going to make 2 cards with this die set today. I love the stackable whipped cream. You've got some drizzle. You've got 2 different sentiments, yay fall and boo, and there's a frame you can put behind those. There are 3 circles to create an eyeball, a skull, and crossbones. There's a hat for a witch and a little band to go across that, and this die right here creates a handle for a broom, the toothpick, the band for the witch's hat, the band for the broom, and 2 stems for the gourd or the pumpkin, which the pumpkin can also be a jack-o'-lantern. There's also an acorn with a little topper that is separate, and some leaves. It's packed full. You can just make anything you want. This is the Mushroom Harvest 3D embossing folder. So a 3D embossing folder is going to give you really deep impression. I'm going to do this folder onto a piece of cream colored cardstock that is textured, and it has a core that is a different color than the top of the paper. So we're going to do a fun little technique with that. I am wiping it down with a baby wipe, which is a technique that I learned from Yanis Makula. She is the coordinator for all the design team on Spellbinders, and she recommends wetting it down with a baby wipe. I previously have been spritzing it with water. I like both equally, so just whatever you have on hand is going to be fine, but wetting the paper allows you to get a really good impression. It allows the paper to stretch a little bit, and then it doesn't crack. And while I was saying all that, you notice that I was sanding the paper down. That is revealing the core of the paper. You can see that little bit darker shade of tan that came through as I sanded it with my sanding block. But in the process of sanding, I pressed it down. So I just locked it back in place, lining it up, and ran it back through that folder to really increase that pattern again. So now I'm going to put the card together with the die cut pieces that I used from this set. On the cupcake itself, I die cut a little pattern that had holes in it just to give the cake like texture. This is my pumpkin spice cupcake, by the way, with some buttercream frosting, and I'm going to use a little bit of Copic markers on the edge of these frosting pieces. I wanted it to look a little bit like toasted marshmallow. Yeah, let's go with toasted marshmallow frosting for the pumpkin spice cupcake. And I'm using E11, E13, and E15. They blend really nicely together and give me that toasty fall look I'm going for. So now when you glue these together, you just follow like the swerve line of them all. There are some lines that cut into the frosting, and I found you can easily tuck the next layer into that little line and it nestles in there really good if you want to put it together like I have here. I'm going to show you another way to do it on my second card. So I put the acorn together. I am coloring out the stems and gluing those in place. I just did white because I was cutting out a bunch of different things from that one die that cuts out all the little pieces, and then I just, color all the things the color I want them to be. So that works out pretty good. And here's the gourd. I love that there's a pumpkin and a gourd, and besides that, you can make the pumpkin a jack-o'-lantern, which I think is so clever. All right, so I added the drizzle onto that bottom layer of frosting so it would look like caramel, and I love how that cupcake is coming together. For my background, I took some frayed burlap distress oxide and just went around the edges to really darken that up, and I like a shadow on the outside because it helps draw your eye into the center. Plus I like things to be a little inky and splattery, like that's my happy place. So I'm going to do all those things, but you could also make this card just clean and simple and crisp without that, if that's what you love. All right, so here's that little toothpick here. This is so you can stick little things into the cupcake, like this little sentiment that says yay fall, and then there's other things you can stick on there too if you want, like some of like a gourd or the acorn or whatever you thought looked cute. So a lot of fun possibilities with this die set of mixing and matching the different pieces and putting them on in different ways and just, you know, decorating your cupcake. It's like Cupcake Wars, but with paper. So on top of my cupcake, I'm adding a pumpkin and a leaf. I did accent a bunch of the leaves with some Copic markers too. It has already lines cut into the paper that gives it a little bit of dimension, and I followed those. Now for my pumpkin, I wanted it to be like a sugary treat on top, so I coated it with this glaze and then added some rock candy glitter. On the little caramel drizzle, I just did the glaze. I didn't add the sugar to that, and I love how that turned out. Like, it almost literally looks edible. I love that rock candy glitter so much. All right, so I took some paper that I thought really matched my card base and the stuff in my card. I cut out the center of it so that I didn't waste all that brown paper, because I just wanted a thin little border around my card front before adding it to my A2 top folding card base. So that's 11 inches by 4 1/4, scored at 5.5. I also brought in the Fall Thoughtfulness stamp and die set of the month from Spellbinders and used that to stamp the inside. I wanted a little more pumpkin something on the inside, so I stamped that with marmalade ink, distress oxide ink, and then I added a sentiment at the top as well, leaving plenty of room to write in the middle, because you got to have a little personalized message in there. So this says, "Thanks for your thoughtfulness," to finish off my very first card with the September Club Kits from Spellbinders. Now, I'm not even using all of the club kits available in this video. There are plenty more. One that's really cool this month that I think you would really like is the small die of the month. So I'm going to link all of the club kits for you below so you can check them out. And now let's move on to Halloween. I have this Sunflower Corner Better Press kit of the month. It is just the Better Press plate that comes to you each month. This is a really beautiful fall image. I'm not using it for fall. I'm going to kind of creep it up a little bit. I have some of the Better Press ink I'm adding to the plate. As you can see, it's already laid down onto my magnetic Better Press platform. And then my paper, I just take Better Press paper. It's like a cotton paper. This is a gray tint to it. Tape it onto that plate. It magnets onto the base, and then you run both through your die cutting machine, and it works on several different die cutting machines, not just the ones available at Spellbinders, but that is the one that I used. So it is really cool. It presses the ink down into the paper. It presses that whole image into the paper and creates like an indentation. It's not as deep as an embossing folder presses into paper, but it presses down in there, and it's just that letterpress type of look. So I am adding some hickory smoke and black soot ink over the top of this. I'm giving it a real smoky, spooky vibe. I love making my own backgrounds so much, so doing stuff like this is totally my favorite part of card making. So after I did that, I spritzed the card panel with water and the excess ink on my desk with water so I could pick that up and splatter it. You'll see throughout this video, splatter. Yeah, it's my favorite. So I'm just using a paintbrush to do that, and then I can dab up any extra ink and water off of my background there, and you can see how it has some lighter areas, darker areas, the splattery goodness. I love how this background turned out, and you could really put anything on this, but I really felt like it was going with like a skull and crossbones vibe. So that's what I'm going to do here. This cupcake is red velvet. I have my cupcake liner on there, and I offset the liner with the detail down a little bit, so you had a little bit of a gray border at the top. I loved that. So I wanted to show you a different way to put that together. And here's my little skull. It's backed with some black glitter paper. And then for the bones, I crisscross them, and I'm just shadowing all of those pieces with my W2 marker to just give it a little bit more life. Now for the frosting, this is the buttercream frosting. I am going to splatter it with some tart cranberry. It could look like something else Halloween-y, like, you know, blood. And then for my cupcake to sit upon, I added a 3/4 of an inch strip of glossy black cardstock. Now the little skull there is getting the witch's hat, which I die cut from glitter paper, and some mirror cardstock for the hat band, which is the same mirror cardstock I used for that drizzle. I also used some red glitter paper, and then I just stacked my frosting on top of that with foam squares. So the drizzle part is mounted to the cupcake, halfway on the cupcake, halfway on the card, and each cupcake piece just touches each other, but it's mounted with a foam square. So little different than card number 1. And I just started then popping up and sticking down all the other pieces. You can see on my toothpick, this time I tucked it behind the cupcake and added an eyeball. It's so cool. And then some bats. I used a lot of glitter paper, mirror paper, regular paper for a lot of contrast on this, and that background with the better press is so good. I added just a little touch of that same glaze to the kind of lines that's already in the cupcake frosting to give it like a highlight. And it did make my mica spray kind of spread out a little bit. So I just did a tiny bit. All right, we're on to card number 3, which features this sunflower border Glimmer Hot Foil Kit of the Month. This does come with a roll of foil, and the color you get varies. Not every person's going to get the same, but I happen to be using some polished brass foil today. I put that on my preheated Glimmer Hot Foil system face up. The foil goes face down, and then my cardstock, I taped it in place, and then when the timer went off about a minute later, I run it through my die cutting machine, just removing that whole entire platform. And I think this image is beautiful. All of the things from this month make me so happy. It's a mix of things that are kind of cute and things that are really pretty, with the cupcakes to the flowers. So it is a mix of styles in today's video, but I always have so much fun just bringing all my kits together and seeing what I'm going to create. And sometimes the techniques, one rolls over into the next card. Sometimes I use leftovers from a previous card onto the next, which is what I'm going to do with the leftover foil from this project. Now, sometimes when I tape my plates down, it makes like a makeshift shim, and I get a little excess foiling, and I just use my sanding eraser to remove that. Now that my sentiment is hot foiled, I am using some Frosted Glass Distress Oxide ink to create kind of a sky background for my foiled image. I splattered that with water, just a titch. This one is a really light color, so the water splatter doesn't show up as much. It just kind of softens it out a little bit. And then I have some gold metallic watercolor I'm going to spritz on now. Straight from the paintbrush, I get the bigger splatters. When I drag it across the edge of this window sheet, I get the really fine splatter. And my usual scraggly paintbrush works better for this, but I just used what was in my hand and it worked fine. All right, I wanted a shadow layer for this image, so I brought in the original image, laid it down on my cardstock, and just bumped the die up a little bit above that so I could have a shadow layer that would line up perfectly. All right, now for the coloring, I really wanted to let the hot foil shine and I wanted it to pop. So I'm taking that same tumbled glass and I'm going around the image. I'm not going to color the image in on this one, but just give it a blue highlight all the way around. I think it's so gorgeous and really stands out on its own, just hot foiled, but you know, color it in too because it is so gorgeous. I can just see it in some really beautiful fall colors, but also just the touch of gold with the blue here is so pretty to me. I love it. I mounted this onto an A2 card that is 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. And now I'm adding these, I think are called fortune teller baubles, and they have this kind of iridescent finish, but it more focuses on the shade of blue that really went with this card. So I tucked some under my shadow panel there and then put some on the sunflowers as well to complete this card. I think it is so pretty. Just simple and pretty. Anyways, let me know what you think after you watch this whole video, which is your favorite card. Let's move on to card number 4, where I'm going to use this extra foil piece. I have a solid plate heating up there on my Glimmer Hot Foil system. I'm going to put a piece of cardstock on the back side of the foil, the pretty side, down onto that solid plate. Once it heats up, I run it through. Now, I forgot, whenever I do a solid plate like this, I always put in an extra shim, and I forgot the extra shim. So you'll see what happens. I don't get a solid transfer of that foil, but sometimes I'm okay with that. I really like a kind of shabby look to my cards, you know, it kind of plays into that ink blendy, splattery feel. So I'm going to use it. I'm not going to waste it. I would have liked it solid, but I'm going with it. It's okay. It's handmade card making, right? So now I'm coloring in my image, and yes, I'm going to do a soft blue kind of turquoisey pumpkin because I love it. I did once get a blue pumpkin from a pumpkin patch that grew, but it wasn't quite this blue, but that's okay. I love it, so I'm doing it, and you totally do you. What colors you love, those are the colors you should color your pumpkin, right? You could do a purple pumpkin with oranges, like just really have fun. It's a stamped image. It doesn't have to be 100% realistic, right? It's art, it's fun, go with it. So there is my pumpkin. I enjoyed coloring this in the blue. And then I'm going to do some more fall colors around it. So I have my Y28 marker, which is a really good gold color, by the way. It has a brownish undertone. So it's going to work for these little, kind of like a piece of wheat or a little leafy branch. Whatever you want to color it as is fine. And then I will add a little shadow on the bottom of each of those leaves, just like a dot of the E57. And you can see just having that little shadow really brings this to life. So it's some really simple Copic coloring here. So I'm starting out with my lightest color, YR02, on the remaining leaves, and that's going to be my lightest color. And then I'll come in with some darker colors to really give this some shadowing as well, so that it just brings it a more realistic vibe. And maybe the pumpkin's not realistic in blue, but having the shadowing really, I don't know, it brings the images to life to me. I love coloring with my Copic markers. I am not an expert Copic colorist. I just have fun doing it. And I know that I'm going to need two or three markers that work well together to kind of blend those things out. So I just play with it and I have fun. All right, next I'm going to die cut these out with the coordinating dies. You can get the clear stamp set of the month without the dies, or you can get it with the dies. Totally your choice. I decided I love that kind of shadow layer look from the previous card, so I carried that over into the design of this card and put a turquoise layer behind my pumpkin. And then I just have an extra die cut while I had my dies out, die cut one for the sentiment to pop it up a little bit. For the bottom of my card, I have some corrugated cardstock in my stamp room that I've had forever, and I thought it would be fun to put it down there. It kind of reminds me of it kind of has the vibe of like a wooden box or a straw bale, or it just has that texture that's really fun. So we'll glue the things down. I popped up the pumpkin a little bit, put a little extra thick cardstock at the bottom of the pumpkin where it sits on the corrugated cardstock so it would touch that. Sometimes you need just a little extra lift there. And then we'll stick that whole thing down to another A2 size card. And to embellish, I have some gold baubles, and I like this gold on gold look because it's not too busy, but it definitely has that textural interest. So what a beautiful card. Even though not all of the foiling showed up, I'm in love with it. I love this look. I think it's really pretty. It's a really fun card to hold and turn in the light, and you get that shine of the hot foil. Gorgeous. All right, we're going to move on to card number 5. I am featuring now the embossing folder of the month. So yes, we have a 3D embossing folder and an embossing folder in this video. They are different. They are separate club kits. And this one is the Falling Leaves and Stripes, Cascading Leaves and Stripes. So I spritzed the cardstock on this one because I'm using watercolor cardstock. It's really thick, and I felt like softening the paper would really be helpful when embossing it. And I am going to paint this up with my brand new Distress Mica spray stains. This is the newest collection for fall and Halloween, and pulling out these 3 colors, decided they would be perfect for this background. So I don't remember the names of them. I will link them for you below. And this one is kind of an orangey color. It's going to go right at the middle. I did paint the watercolor cardstock with water first and then came in with the mica. You want to make sure you shake it up really well before you put it down so you do get some of the mica to come out. This one is like, Unraveled, I think is the name of this one. It is probably like my new favorite. It's not quite yellow. It's not quite gold. It's very translucent when you paint it out. I don't know, it just was really fun to play with. I'm going to let it dry actually, and I'll come back and add some more to it after I do this layer. Like, I really wanted it to be a little bit more yellow, so after I did the couple coats, I decided we'll wait, come back to it. This one is something acorn. Oh, mold cider is the orange one, and this one is like falling acorn. Some of you probably know and are like shouting them out to me right now. Thank you so much for your help. But they were just really fun to do something different with and paint with. I think it's a really fun medium. I love using them for splatter. I will use them for splatter on this card, and I love the mica. What I will tell you is the mica takes longer to dry than you think. Even when it appears dry to the eye, sometimes the mica part, the shiny part, needs extra time. So a lot of times I will set my mica creations aside for a while and come back to it. Now you can see I'm using that excess on my glass mat there to do some splattering. I like the wet on wet splatter look. It really like spreads out. It's so gorgeous. And then I also have my heat tool. I added a little bit of water splatter as well. And then with everything dry, I decided I would do some splatter with that unraveled straight from the bottle because it's so light when you add water. I wanted this one to just be direct on there, and that's going to give me some really good shiny mica spots. There, you can see it when it's wet, and here it is when everything is dry. Now, a lot of this is going to get covered up, so whenever I do splatter, I tend to do more because a lot of it will be covered up, and so I think it's fine just to let your hand go wild with the splatter. All right, now I have the other image from that clear stamp set of the month called Fall Thoughtfulness. I stamped it and embossed it with black powder, and I'm heat setting that. Also on watercolor paper, I decided if I'm watercoloring, I might as well watercolor out this image. I do have a little like painter's palette here, and I'm just tapping out some of the ink into that little reservoir so I can use it to paint with. And I have that same smaller paintbrush I had out earlier for this, and I'm just going to paint it in. I did wet the leaf first with water and then watercolor, and that mold cider, see how it looks red, but it's really like a intense undertone of red orange. I think it's gorgeous, and it does remind me of mold cider. It's so pretty, and it's totally that time of year. I mean, it feels that way here in Idaho. As I'm doing this voiceover, we have a very rainy day, which is such a nice break from the super hot weather that we've been having, and just making these fall and Halloween cards really is getting me in the mood for fall things. I even this morning made apple cider donuts per my child's request, and they were quite good. It was the first time I tried this recipe, so I'm like all into fall right now. And I just bring it on. I'm going to pull out the decorations and put them up this week too. All right, so there is my watercolor piece coming together. I used all three of the colors, some a little bit more intense, some watered down, and it's really fun to play with. So if you haven't watercolored with your Distress Mica spray stains, you got to give it a try. It's so gorgeous. Some of it waters out and you don't have a lot of mica, then you have areas with more, and it just has a really fun look. And I like a loose kind of messy watercolor, so you'll see that in the close-ups, but you know, you can use a finer brush and really keep it tight and neat if that's your style too. So I die cut that out, and then I stamped the sentiment again. Thanks for your thoughtfulness. You can just never have too many thank you cards, right? Die cut that out, and then it's time to put things together. So I really felt like my leafy image here needed a shadow, so I pulled out that paper pad again from scrapbook.com, pulled out the darkest shade. It really goes well with that acorn. So good with that acorn color of mica spray. But I didn't want to waste the outer edge, so I die cut this with a rectangle die, and then I have a frame to mount it on. I think you saw me do that on the very first card as well. I don't want to waste that paper in the middle. So that's what rectangle dies are so good for. You can also do it with a paper trimmer if you're really careful, but the rectangle dies are awesome. You could even cut a circle out of the middle. All right, so there it is. I cut around there like I fussy cut. It is not perfect. Like, don't look close. But it gets the job done, and no one's going to inspect it. Unless I send it to you, you might be like, oh, remember how she didn't cut this perfectly? Let me check that out, right? No one's going to care. Plus I've got my, you know, inky splattery and loose watercolor, so it goes with the whole vibe. All right, I tied some white with gold twine around the bottom of this card, and then I'm going to add my sentiment to the top there. It's got a little foam squares on it and a little bit of glue so it can overlap. And now it's time to bring in the wax seal of the month, the Fall Meadow. It comes with these copper wax beads, but I'm not using that color. I really needed it to match my card today, so I'm bringing in gold. If you get the wax seal kit, it comes with these gold wax pieces, so I'm using that. I'm heating up the wax in the little spoon, resting on the stand with a real candle underneath there, and then it's time to open up my wax seal of the month. It's got these really cute flowers on there, and this is going to look really cool on my card. I'm going to go again for that kind of loose, crazy look. Putting aside the copper, not using that today, and then I will bring in my card and pour the wax right onto my card, right over the center of that twine. It's quite bumpy, quite textured, but look at this. I'm going to press this stamp right into that melty wax. You're going to let it sit there for, 15 seconds or so. I counted to like a minute because I'm like that. But you can see the flowers in that, even though it's not a complete circle. It's so cool. And then Spellbinders has these pens in gold and silver that you can use to color on top of there. This ink will dry there. It's not going to rub off on your fingers after a minute. So it's very cool to highlight that pattern once you've stamped it down there. I really wish for a white one. I don't know if you saw my recent snowflake video. I did some wax seal on that and did white on the wax seal with P.H. Martin's No Bleed White, and that worked good. So there is, ways around that, but I would really love a white pen. I really would. All right, so that is card number 5. Here you can see all 5 of the cards I made today. It really is so much fun playing with this stuff. So I hope that I've given you some inspiration either with your Spellbinder club kits of the month. Maybe you're interested in the club kits. Again, they're linked for you below. And maybe you just got some ideas for card making here today, and I hope that's true. Thank you so much for visiting with me and letting me share my creations with you. It's my favorite thing to do. And I will see you guys again very soon on the next video. Happy stamping! Bye!